right. What up, good people? We are back for another incredible episode of the Planning Podcast. Now, you may say, once you see who's on the other side of this, that is bruh from Financial Literacy Week from the Financial Freedom Project. So, the name, image, and likeness workshop that we had, it was really more of a panel discussion. We had experts come in and talk about what is the future of athletics. One of the individuals I'm really excited about to be sitting next to, I have an immense amount of respect for as a father, as a husband, as a leader, and really as an innovator. And so as we get into the state of athletics, college athletics, be able to get a good understanding of name, image, and likeness from someone that is really an expert in this field. But also we're going to go on this journey of getting an understanding of what it takes to be able to build, establish infrastructure and scale solutions at a level that is really a template that you could use across the globe. So thoroughly excited to welcome our guest today, Jim Cavale.
What's up, man?
What's up, big dog?
Thanks so much for having me. This is such a cool space, and it's so cool to be in Ensley, where you have done so much to plant your flag and make an impact. And obviously, I've watched you build your business, but to be here at your offices is special. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, you set the tone a good bit. I know I've been able to spend some time with Jim in different capacities, been able to visit his office and visit really different aspects of what you've been able to put your hands on. And so you've been leading from the front, my brother. And so I do have a question to get us rolling. This is a question that we like to interface not only with the students that we're in front of, the student athletes we're in front of, but also just change agents like yourself. And this is what we got. Let's say you had an unlimited amount of money and an unlimited amount of time. What problem would you solve?
Wow.
Let's go.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing I would try to address is helping people identify their dreams and be able to customize a path to actually go for them. And I think that starts at a young age. And so thinking about programs that can really address our youth at a young age before they're fully formed, as they're being influenced by their environment, and thinking about how to really help them identify their gift set, how they're wired, and what is actually the opportunity for them to live in their gifts and dream, and then be able to work toward that on a customized track, whether it's education or outside of school. I think there's so many people that don't find that until sometimes it's too late or just later in life. And so I think creating tools, technology, in-person programs, and just overhauling the education system to help young people start to learn things they need to learn about themselves and about this world to be able to solve problems and build things. So to me, like that's always been my passion, is the generations coming after me. And the reason it's my passion is because, well, number one, God put it on my heart at a young age. And I was told by many people that you know, I would have the opportunity to impact generations coming after me in my church and in my family. I was constantly told to me, but also because if you can impact the generations coming after you, when you're gone, that impact still goes. And they're going to impact the generations coming after them. And so I would think with all of the money, I would think, how do you invest it into programs, technology that is really going to change how young people not only are educated, but understand themselves and can find a dream to really carry them with passion into executing in this world.
That's incredible. What would you say was your first dream?
Man, I think my first dream was to play pro baseball. Like I loved playing baseball growing up, and I put everything into it. You know, if I did well in school, it was because I wanted to get into the right college to play baseball. If I, worked out, it was working out and being healthy because I wanted to be the best baseball player I could be. And so it really drove a lot of me. And this isn't all about the first dream answer, but I'll say it. When that dream fell apart, when I was in college and I realized I'm not going to play pro baseball, I realized how much my identity was tied into that dream. And I went through a transition where I had to decide, am I going to be depressed? Am I going to, am I going to pout and be down about the fact that my first dream didn't happen? Or am I going to use all of the work ethic, the leadership, the discipline, all the great things that I got out of going to college as a student and being an athlete at the college level, am I going to take that and redistribute it, repackage it into a new dream, right? And that's what I ended up doing, and I did it fast enough where I didn't really have too much of a low, you know. But I also think it's dangerous to dream, because a dream, if you really are going to put everything into it, will become at least part of your identity.
Yeah.
And so you got to be resilient when maybe that dream doesn't work out. And also, that dream I just said is why I'm sitting right here right now. Because while I didn't play pro baseball, what I did do was go all the way from New York, where I grew up, where all of my family still lives. That's home for me, right? And I left and came 1,000 miles down south to Montevallo, Alabama, to play Division II baseball, chasing that dream. And that led me to eventually meet my wife and start a family, build businesses in Birmingham, and be sitting here. Like, if I don't follow that dream, no, I didn't end up playing pro baseball and achieving it, but it led to other opportunities for dreams. And I think that's so important for people to understand, is one door closed on a dream is not the end. It's an opportunity to use what you got out of that dream to open another door up.
Wow. And you know, that is a common issue with student athletes. It was an issue with myself that I dealt with in regards of commingling we'll just say the characteristics of what it took to be a great athlete, a great football player, and literally saying that, all right, this is my identity, the football player, this helmet. And you mentioned something in regards of the duration of time that you spent reconfiguring, probably, I would say, from the neck up, how you want to reflect yourself as an individual. And we've seen a number of athletes where we say, why is he still working at, man, he was a great athlete, he's doing what now? And it's been that issue of discovery. And the theme that I just pulled from that is that, you know, whenever you do have a dream and it could potentially be disturbed, don't take that as a long-term disruption, but it's actually for more like refinement, right? To get you to that full destination. So that's really important. So what we've been able to learn thus far is that Jim, former athlete, ball player, what position in baseball?
Shortstop.
Okay. Oh. That says a lot. My boy's playing baseball. He's 6 years old now. He ain't out there, you know, turning.
I've seen
two.
videos though.
Yes, sir.
I've seen videos. He's turning on it. He's turning on it.
He's swinging that bat now, which we like. But even as you were able to transition out of Montevallo, shortstop, we'll just say all-star baseball player, what happened immediately after that? So baseball, essentially, you're like, all right, bet. Not going to the pros, but now I need to move towards what is going to be this pro aspect of life and leadership.
Yeah, so I had a extra year of school I had to finish to graduate. And so it was the first time really in my life that I wasn't playing baseball and that identity had been stripped away, and I had this year of time. And I asked myself, how can I use this year to have experiences that can set the stage for whatever I do when I graduate? And, you know, it's like, when you're a baseball player, you never go on spring break because you're playing during spring break. That year, I got to go on my first spring break. You know what I mean? I remember where I went, West Palm Beach, Florida. It was a great trip. And so, but also I started a TV and radio network at the University of Montevallo because I was passionate about broadcasting. I kind of thought, you know, if I'm not going to play baseball, I really think I have on-camera talent. I'm going to broadcast sports. So why not start now? So we started a TV and radio network in Montevallo. They had all the equipment for the most part, but they had no operator. So I operated it. I hired student workers. I raised capital. I had sponsors. I really built the network from the ground up. And I was broadcasting all the basketball and baseball games on the radio. And I was doing a sports TV show on the TV network right after I did every game. So I was learning how to edit. I was learning how to write. I was obviously doing the on-camera thing. And by the time I got done, I realized I'm not a broadcaster. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a founder. Like I had to do all these different things to get this going. I can use the ability to speak as an entrepreneur. And so that last year of school really, honestly, that changed everything for me. I never took one business class.
Wow.
But that changed everything for me.
So, I'm a hone in on the more so the business infrastructure side, especially around like the money aspect of it. Because you mentioned something that, because I would assume this may have been mid-early 2000s. So 1999 wasn't too far away. So there was a lot of evolution when it pertains to technology and those systems and operations. But when you think about raising money, right, and there's been more of we'll just say more access to the information on how that works over the last, I would say 10, 15 years. But during that time frame, how did you package your vision to the point to where there was a dollar amount tied to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I didn't know how to build a business plan at that point, or create an evaluation and raise capital, tie it to stock, and I didn't know any of that yet. I learned that later in my career, but I knew that all founders went to family and friends when they were trying to start something.
Facts.
And I was blessed to at least have some family and friends to go to. And it wasn't a lot of money. It was $5,000, but it helped me buy my first Apple computer. And I'll tell you, this was 2004, okay? Apple was not cool back then, all right? Nobody had an iPhone. The iPod had just come out. And when I bought that Apple computer and put it in my dorm room, people were making fun of me because nobody had an Apple. But I bought an Apple because Apple was the best at that time to edit video on. And so I used the capital for things like that. And then I started selling advertising for the broadcasts to generate more revenue. And once again, we're talking 5 figures. We're not talking about a ton of money, but enough money to run a network, to pay student workers, to be able to really build something that had a team doing it, not just me by myself. Even though I was still doing most of the work, I had people helping me. And so that's really where it started. And we could go into what I've learned in each business I've built on how to raise capital, but I didn't know what I didn't know back then. I just went to family and friends and said, hey, I got this vision to use my last year of college to do this, and I would love it if you would support me. Absolutely. And, you know, my family, where I come from, is not wealthy. You know, I went to a college preparatory school, Christian Brothers Academy, with a lot of people with means and a lot of other people that the endowment at Christian Brothers paid for their tuition. I was kind of right in the middle of that. And so it was a good balance where merit was what it was all about. You had to earn everything, but people always believed in me. And I think we'll talk about this throughout the interview, but there's not really a room I walk into where I don't think I make the room better. And that's not conceited. That's because of how my dad and my coaches and my mom and all the people around me, they made me think that at a young age. And that was the differentiator for me, is confidence to go try to raise money, go try to build something, to take risks. And a lot of people don't have that. They need somebody, they need a voice when they're younger telling them, man, every room you go into is better when you're in it because of this, because of this, because of this. And then you know what? They'll believe it.
Yeah. That's profound, especially for the athletes that are watching this, student athletes that may be sitting in their dorm room right now, rubbing their knee because they just got injured from a last game, and they're trying to think through, how do I navigate this last year at this college and university? And one of the major takeaways was, plug in. Get proximate to your professors, get proximate to the folks that are there, ask questions, stay curious. Don't use this as a really a determinant that's going to lead to the next steps that you take, but more so really an opportunity to become.
And, you know, here's the thing. Even if you're just a student, not a student hyphen athlete, and I'll tell you in a little bit, I want to bring it up. I don't like that term, and I want to tell you why. But if you're a college athlete or you're just a college student, okay, the reality is right now, if we're honest, unless maybe you're trying to be a doctor or a lawyer, your GPA isn't going to be the differentiator based on where you get hired. Okay.
Facts.
I'm not telling you not to get a degree. I'm not telling you not to get a 4.0. If you can get it, get it. I couldn't. I wasn't smart enough and good enough at school anyways, straight up. But the value of college is what you do outside of the classroom.
Yes.
And so while you're there, crush it in the classroom. If you're playing sports, crush it in sports. Use your notoriety as an athlete to meet as many people as you can, because it is true. It's not what you know, it's who you know. So meet as many people as you can while they still want to meet you. But really, it's about finding opportunities to get passionate about and do things outside of class while you're in college. Squeeze everything you can out of that school. And here's the thing is, like, I went to Montevallo, a small liberal arts college that most people outside of Alabama have never even heard of. But I got a lot out of that place. And sometimes I try to imagine what would it have been like if I went to Harvard or somewhere like that. Well, part of it is there's so much competition to do things outside of the classroom. I might not have done any of what I did at Montevallo. The other part is there's a lot more resources. It might have even been that much better because of who I was doing it with and who I would have met doing it and everything else. But the point is that doesn't matter. Wherever you're at, it could be, you know, X community college. It can be wherever. Get the most juice you can. Squeeze the most juice out of that place outside of class.
And I think that's a beautiful transition. And when you think about the value of relationships, and so when we we'll just say move from gym post college, right? So you've been an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, right? So you work within a confine, but you are very innovative in identifying some of the really the best systems to be able to implement the problem you're solving. And then the way in which I was able to get connected with Jim was during his leadership at IronTribe. And so for those that aren't aware of IronTribe, can you just give a brief explanation of,
Yeah, so IronTribe is, a fitness community that is in 47 locations throughout the Southeast. Started here in Birmingham, Alabama. My partner and the founder of the first gym, Forrest Walden, was a guy I met. I was working out at his gym, approached him about expanding it because it was such a great experience. And we ended up growing it to 4 gyms here in Birmingham, and then we franchised it. It's group fitness, but with personal training. So it's done in classes, CrossFit style workouts, but it's really evolved more into high intensity interval training style workouts. Right. But it's really less about what you're doing in the workout and more about it's a community, people's third place. They go there because of the other members and their coaches. And so, before IronTribe, I started my first company in 2005. Okay. And I think it's important to talk about because it's a failure. So I started my first company in 2005 when I got out of Montevallo. And as you said earlier, in 99 or so, technology started to explode. And I had this experience as a college athlete where I was mailing out DVDs and VHS tapes to try to get recruited to schools outside of my region. All my offers coming out of New York to play college baseball were in the Northeast. I wanted to play down south. The players are better. The weather's better. Right. I think the girls are prettier. So I'm trying to get down south. And so I'm mailing out tapes and stuff, and I end up getting this opportunity to go to Montevallo. But when I got out in 2005, I thought, there's a way technology could scale mailing out DVDs and VHS tapes. This could be done on the internet. And so we created NextSpecs to be a place where high school athletes could upload their highlights and an encrypted version of their academic transcripts and email college coaches. And so we did that for 5 years, from 2005 to 10. And at first, man, we took off. We were selling the product to high schools. They were paying an annual subscription for it. Then we started doing state deals with the Alabama High School Athletic Association, the Louisiana High School Athletic Association, et cetera. And about 3 years in, I made a really big mistake. And that is I got rid of our subscription revenue and I made it free for all athletes and tried to switch to an advertising model. And we ended up selling it, but for parts in 2010. And we were early, if you're familiar with Huddle, we were early in that game.
I was about to say,
we
it
were
sounds
early
like
in
Huddle.
that game.
Yeah.
And so that business and the mistakes I made, I did raise capital and I gave up too much equity for the raise that I did. And I did hire people and there's things that I would have done different. And we did have some success, but then I made some decisions that I wouldn't have made if I look back at it. Man, that was huge for me. And it put me in a place by 2010 when we had finally sold it, where Forrest and I met. I was a client at his gym and I was able to jump into something new. And over the next 7 years, from really 2010 to the end of 2016, we built IronTribe into a national franchise.
Wow. So prior to IronTribe, you mentioned about, a few aspects that you were able to learn on the fly. What would you say would be one or two takeaways? Hindsight's 2020. We sold the business for X, Y, and Z. But if I would have made this change, or if I would have kept this type of structure, we probably would have, 2X, 3X what we've been able to sell it for.
I think the most important thing you can do in business is find ways to generate recurring revenue.
Yep. And
we had a really good model the first couple of years of NextSpecs where high schools were paying us an annual fee. And the reason recurring revenue is so important is because you can, if you do multi-year contracts, predict out basically what your revenue is going to be as a base every year when you start the year, and then add new revenue to it. Thanks. Investors will pay 10x your gross top line revenue to buy a company with good recurring revenue and good year-over-year growth. I didn't know that when I was building that business. And the advertising business is lucrative, but it's a little more episodic from a revenue standpoint. It's tougher to plan around, and it can put you in tough spots with the capitalization of your business. You can run out of cash easier when you're generating episodic revenue. A lot of people tie themselves in whatever business they build. They got this one client that makes up 30, 40, 50% of their entire business. Yep. I call it the danger of one. Yeah. If that guy leaves or that company leaves, you're screwed.
So what?
Right? And everybody knows this story if you're an entrepreneur. And that was another mistake I think we made, because when we switched to advertising, we had one really big sponsor, a sporting goods store, that when we lost them, it really hurt us. And if we just had that grind out subscription revenue model with high schools that we were already building, I think it would have been a different outcome. It would have been a better outcome financially when we sold it.
And, the lessons that you were able to reflect on during that exit, and I'm pretty sure that there was a melting pot of people that you were able to interface with and folks that you met. So whenever you connected with Forrest, of course you were working out at the gym. What made you say, all right, I want to partner with this guy?
It's funny. It's a weird story. I've never even told this before, but I remember going to Yogurt Mountain. Okay. It's the same one they still have over in Whole Foods Plaza on 280 here in Birmingham, East Birmingham, if you're not familiar. And I was over there, and it was a new franchise, and it was growing. You remember the yogurt phase back in the late 2000s, early 2010s? Date us a little bit. But Yogurt Mountain was one of several brands nationwide that became really big and was growing fast. And I was proud that it was grown here in Birmingham. And I met the founder and was talking to him at his store. And it was a really good experience. And I walked out and I thought, that's basically what Forrest has. But Forrest has it in an industry I love, fitness. He's changing lives, and that's so scalable, and every neighborhood needs an IronTribe in it. And so I went back to Forrest and I said, I just exited NextSpecs. I'm looking for something new to do. I feel like I could help you grow this. Do you have a vision for multiple units? And he said, yes, that is the vision. I did that in my last business. He had a 55 gym master franchise called Fitness Together that he had built. It was a personal training concept that he had a lot of success with. And so he said, yeah, that is the plan. And so he basically was like, open up our second location on Highway 280 in Birmingham and hit the same numbers. And if it works, we'll open up more and we'll raise capital and we'll grow it nationwide. And that's what we did.
Wow. At what phase in life did marriage, children, so now you're at IronTribe, what's some of the behind the scenes activities that you're managing that folks may not know about?
So I'm such an anomaly. I mean, it's like I just don't fit anywhere. So my story is I'm this Italian guy from New York. I'm living in Birmingham. I love it here. I'm building a life here. This is 2005-06, right when I get out of college. I'm building my first company, and I meet my wife, Yasmin. And I saw her out at a bar. A buddy of mine, who you know real well, I'm going to name him, Aubrey Bennett, was too scared to talk to her. Aubrey lives down here, works in the Birmingham City School District, and is a brother of mine. We grew up together. We've known each other since we were this big in New York. He followed me down here from New York to live in Birmingham. So Aubrey's like, he's scared to talk to her. So I go up and talk to her, and she's just standoffish, like won't give me the time of day. And so she completely embarrasses me in front of all my friends and walks away. And so I don't see her again for months. But when I see her months later, we had a mutual friend that connected us. And we started talking, and she's a Puerto Rican, born in Puerto Rico, Caguas, Puerto Rico. And she moved to Boston when she was a kid, learned English from Bostonians. So she looks Puerto Rican, sounds like she's from Boston, and I met her in Birmingham, Alabama. All right. So, and Yaz had a 3-year-old at the time, Savannah. And so all my friends are like, you're 23. She was 2 years older than me, 25. What are you doing? You got a business you're starting. We all got a house together. Like, let's live up life, And I decided not only to start dating her, but, eventually we got serious, and it was just me and her and Savannah. And for me, at 23, 24 years old, that changed my life, because when you're a guy and you're that age, you're just naturally selfish. We're all naturally selfish anyways, but I had to learn how to be a dad at a really young age. We got married. We had 2 more. And so as we were going from NextSpecs to IronTribe, it was a risky time for me. And we hadn't had our second yet. We have 3 kids now, but I had Savannah and I had my wife, and that's a responsibility and a weight that I felt. And that only motivated me more. And Forrest was such an amazing, and still is such an amazing father and husband, 4 kids, adopted 1 from Ethiopia. And he just, man, he changed my life, not just as a business partner, but watching him be a father, watching him be a dad or a husband really impacted me and how I built my family.
I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that, because, I don't believe in work-life balance. I'm more of a work-life boundaries. So, because everything's always going to be off balance, and so you got to establish intentional boundaries if you're with your children, if you're with your wife, and as you're building a business, it's often compared to a baby. Like you birthed an idea, you gotta hold the baby, you gotta burp the baby, you gotta change the diaper. So there's a level of attention that sometimes the more distant you are, it feels like you're on a trek towards being unsuccessful. So really, really grateful for you to call that out. Is there any best practices that you would share with our leaders that are listening that are like, hey, I'm building something, family proximity is a principle, but having an example to be able to leverage to see the best way to manage that has been difficult. So what would you say would be some good best practices?
Well, first of all, you have to realize time is your only resource. It's your most valuable one. Everything comes from time. And so every time you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So when you start saying yes to everything in business with no intentionality and no vision and strategic plan driving your yeses and nos, you're ultimately saying no to your family when you're saying yes to those things. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you need to be grounded in something bigger than any accomplishment you can have on this earth. For me, that's my faith in God. I believe I was created by God with the gifts that I have and the faults that I have, exactly how he wanted me to be, to do what he wants me to do. And I think it's healthy to think about your life after it's over, eulogy thinking. And that's something a 43-year-old guy, which is my age, would say. It took me time to start thinking that way. But in my 30s, I read a book called Second Mountain by David Brooks. And that really impacted me to think about my life after it's over and reverse engineer. And I think it's really important to think outside of what you're in, because it can help you establish priorities and create boundaries. Right. Communication's everything. Communicating what's going on in your business to your wife, or if it's a woman founder, to your husband, really, really, really important to do. Like, they need to understand enough of what's going on here. So if there is something that is a huge priority, they'll understand when you say, I really got to do this. And you got to communicate back what happened. And of course, in your marriage, you got to communicate too about everything else. Communication's everything. If you just think they're going to understand what you're doing without you telling them, that's not the deal. Last thing I'll say, I could say a lot, but I'll stop here, is don't just think because you're working hard and you believe you're working hard for your family to provide for your family, that's enough. Like, this is your dream. It's not theirs. Okay. This is your dream. And to think that you can work hard for your dream and that's enough, and you're providing for your family, and maybe you're doing well with your business and you're providing financially for your family and you're taking them on trips and doing all these things, but you're not allowing them to pursue their dreams. Their dreams are important to them.
That's right.
And so it's not just about your dreams. And I ran into something with this in 2016. I sold my portion of IronTribe to Forrest. He bought me out. There was two reasons that I sold. One was I wanted to go build something in college sports. We'll get to that in a second. But the other one was my wife wanted to start a company called Glow, a beauty on-demand service powered by technology. And I took 6 months off and helped her get that started because I realized that the whole time she had been living for my dream. And I really never let her dream. She's this talented beauty artist that has been working in cities like Miami, Boston, New York, all over, LA. And now she lands here in Birmingham. She's had the kids. She's been out of work. She wants to go back and use her talents. And we did that for 6 months. Only 6 months, though. We almost tore each other's heads off. And she still has that business today. That was 9 years ago.
Wow.
And Glow is still based over on 20th Street and 3rd Ave in Birmingham, and is a very successful business. And it's been really cool to watch her live her dream.
And that's beautiful because, unfortunately, there's this unspoken strain that entrepreneurs have that it's tough to navigate whenever you bring it home. And without having someone that you have access to or someone that you can glean from to be able, I would say, not only live best practices, but also communicate best practices is extremely important. So you just mentioned influencer. And so there was an exit at IronTribe. Shout out to that. Shout out to Yaz. Shout out Glow. Shout out just the investment from that. And there has been a theme when it pertains to you being proximate to sports, athletics, and seeing blind spots that other folks don't see and building infrastructure to solve it. What led to you establishing an influencer, and then what was the blind spot that you saw that everyone else didn't see?
Well, in the early 2010s, we had the commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey, walk into one of our IronTribe gyms
Yep.
and become a member.
Yep.
And Commissioner Sankey is from Syracuse, New York, like I am. Ended up here in Birmingham, so we had that in common. I knew him from church. We had gone to the same church, Brook Hills, and now he's a member at the gym. And so we became acquaintances, friends through that. And I watched him go from the second in charge of the SEC under my friend and mentor, Mike Slive, who's passed away and was an amazing man to me so many ways. And he's also, Mike Slive, the previous SEC commissioner, also from Syracuse, Utica, New York, just east of Syracuse. So I don't know what it is about Birmingham and the SEC and whatever. I always say we're in the witness protection program. But I watched Greg Sankey go from being number 2 to the head guy, and I watched, him take on that role, and I would talk to him a lot. And in 2016, Ed O'Bannon won his case against the NCAA. For the improper use of his name, image, and likeness in a video game created by EA Sports, the college basketball video game. And when that happened, I talked to people like Greg, not just Greg, other people I knew from my previous business, NextSpecs, when I was building the recruiting stuff. I had enough contacts. I wanted to hear, what do you think about this? And could this ever become part of college sports? And you think the rules will change and all that kind of stuff? And so in 2016, I felt like IronTribe was at a really good place. Fitness is tough.
Yeah.
It's a fad business. I didn't want to be in it forever. And so I went to Forrest, asked him for a buyout. We already had it in our partnership agreement. That's another lesson here is when you're going to partner with somebody, have the exit thought out, have a multiple for the EBITDA or top line revenue or both in there so it's spelled out. Our buyout, it took literally a couple weeks.
Oh, you can't.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like, boom.
Wow.
And so I worked on Glow with Yaz, but I also started traveling around meeting with athletic directors and people that work at colleges. And my thesis after a few months was name, image, and likeness is not a matter of if, but when.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be ready for it. So I need to build a business now that works with schools and helps athletes with something proximate to name, image, and likeness so that whenever it actually happens, we can help with that too.
Right.
And so we launched Influencer in late 2017. And ultimately it was technology for schools and pro teams to buy to help their athletes on social media. Basically, it's a place where athletes could get all the pictures and videos of themselves shot by the media, shot by their school, so they could share it to social, a place where they could look at analytics and the growth of their brand and understand how to grow their brand. And we grew really fast. By 2019, this little new software company out of Birmingham, Alabama, had clients like Duke and North Carolina and USC and Arizona State and like all these schools, And so it was really cool to watch it grow. But also by 2019, legislation had been passed in California that basically made NIL not only inevitable, but it was going to happen by 2021.
Right.
It was going to start in college sports in 2021. And so Teamworks, a bigger software company that already had clients in pros and college across the globe, they came to us and said, we want to buy your company. We want you to stay on board as CEO, and we want you to be the tool for NIL when it starts in 2021.
Wow.
So I did that deal. And it was a good cash deal, but it also came with stock in a company that I believe could go public and really grow to be a really good-sized company. And that's why I stayed on board.
Wow.
And we built for NIL. And in 2021, when NIL started, we built financial tech, fintech, to allow the schools to be able to give the athletes a place to take all the money they were getting paid from collectives, from brands, so that they could be issued a 1099, one 1099 at the end of the year for all the different deals they do. And so the deals could be reported for compliance purposes, which was part of the rules when NIL started. So it was a crazy journey, kind of how it all went down. But for me, it was a lot of fun trying to take a risk, but based on a prediction that I really felt strongly about.
Right. And you know what's interesting, I also heard you speak about one of the issues that athletic departments, colleges, and universities have a tough time navigating is just getting the word out, getting the message out. And it was just a beautiful illustration. It may have been a different panel discussion that I heard you speak about it. Like, hey, this person has 100,000 followers. This person got 200,000 followers. Let's just collectively align our messaging, and we could probably help offset some of the expenses when it pertains to marketing and get directly to the audience that you're looking to get in front of. And so there was a ubiquitous value proposition if it wasn't for the college and university, if it's for the athlete, because even as we get into this next phase of what NIL has evolved into, these athletes are learning that, yeah, you got to be gangster on the field, but we need something to look at, right? Like you got to have some type of value proposition tied to it. And so one last question when it comes to influencer and teamworks. I know that part of building a company that involves technology, there is going to be some level of necessity of resources to be able to develop that demo, develop that experience, the user interface, some of the UX design. And unfortunately, we all know that probably 90% of startups or the companies that receive some type of VC funding or outside funding, that idea is still an idea, right? And so you went from idea to implementation to execution to now exit, right? And so how were your investors once you were able to have that exit through Teamworks, and what were some of the lessons that you learned going through?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when I started Influencer, I had the capital from the IronTribe deal to get it going on my own. I hired 2 engineers. We built the first version of it. I hired 1 staffer that could really help communicate with clients, and I sold it. I was the sales guy. And my thing was like, let me generate, the first few $100,000 of recurring revenue from college and pro teams, and then I'll go raise capital. And that's what I did. When I went to raise capital, I was able to get what I thought was a very fair valuation, and I was able to do it on what's called convertible debt. So basically, the investor had a note with the company, and whatever they put in was put up against a valuation spelled out on the note, and that is the percentage they own. So if they put $100,000 in and the note was for $10 million of valuation, then they ended up with 1% of the company, right? And so ultimately, I was successful at raising a couple $1 million. Wow. And I used that to hire more engineers and to hire more salespeople and staff and build out a real team and a real operation that could get us into the multi-million-dollar recurring revenue game.
Right.
And so that's basically how we capitalize it. Now, when Teamworks came in, we were at a place where we already had 7 figures of recurring revenue. I mentioned earlier, you could get a 10x if you got good year-over-year growth on your top line recurring revenue from investors. So if you're doing $1 million in revenue, you can get a $10 million valuation. If you're doing, $5 million, you can get a $50 million valuation. And a lot of my investors were like, this is it. Let's go raise venture capital and explode this thing. Let's go raise $5-10 million, and let's get a healthy valuation because we've got the revenue to do it. But Teamworks came in and said, we're going to give you a fair valuation, but we're going to de-risk it for you. We're going to allow you to be a part of our organization. You're still CEO. You still got your team, your product. You're going to have to report to our board, but you're going to have capital behind you. You're never going to have to raise it again. And you're going to have other infrastructure and shared services behind you. And we're going to give you cash for what you've built along with stock in our company. And to me, that was a no-brainer, being 37 at the time and having 3 kids, 2 which were really young, and my wife's now starting a company. It was a no-brainer. But my investors were kind of like, wow, we're really going to stop now?
Yeah.
And so, all of them had the choice. This is actually really good. So all of them had the choice when Teamworks acquired Influencer to let some or all of their winnings roll forward into Teamworks.
Wow.
Okay. About half of them just took their money and said, thanks, Jim. Appreciate, what you did in a short period of time. I'm moving on to something else. The other half rolled it forward. And I mean, you're talking about, there's people who, invested, $30,000, $40,000 as part of that $2 million we raised at Influencer early on. And I think when it's all said and done, that kind of money will be worth over $1 million. So I'm talking 20, 25x, I think is very realistic for people who invested in Influencer from where Teamworks ends up exiting. And that's all you can try to do as a founder.
Right. You can't beat it. And if they got some more opportunities over there for that 2030 entry, holla at your boy, because I'm going to be a part of it. So, and that gets to, right before we get into athletes.org, was there any best practices that you were able to extract, because you're running a show influencer, you'll continue to run the show at influencer, but now you're within a larger infrastructure, to where you're rubbing shoulders next to C-suite execs, right? So were there any takeaways and best practices as you were able to work within Teamworks?
Few things. First thing is the founder of Teamworks, Zach Marides, is a really talented guy. He's a Greek guy, 6'6", from Chicago that played football at Duke and ended up living in Durham, and built a great company. He's a really good founder. And he's probably the only founder I've met who is really good at the $0 to $10 million game, and is also really good at the 10 to $200+ million game. I'm talking about annual revenue.
Right.
I learned a lot about myself when I went there, and I think the biggest learning was I respect corporate processes. I learned how to deal with a board. I learned how to sell internally, because when it's a bigger organization, trying to get people to help you do stuff is a lot harder, so you got to sell internally. And you have to have humility to do that. Yeah. You have to say, hey, yeah, I built this company, but these guys own it now. I've got to learn how to get buy-in on this idea that I need these folks to help me with, because they could do something else instead, because there's a lot to do and it's a bigger company. So reporting to a board, coming into a board being prepared with your numbers, prepared to talk about ideas. If you're going to sell a new idea, prepared to talk about the cash you need to do it, but also with the new resources, what's the ROI going to be? I learned all that stuff. And the reason I told that story about Zach is because that's not who I am. Like, I am really good at the $0 to $20 million. I'm great at getting it started, wearing a bunch of hats, then starting to hire people to replace some of my hats. And I can get it to a certain point. Yeah. But and that's why I've done a lot of different things. I've done everything I've done every 5 to 6 years. I'm good at that beginning game, but bring in the Harvard MBA for the next phase. Yeah. Zach's just one guy I've met who just can do both, and he's really good at both.
Yeah, it's I heard someone mention that entrepreneurship is like launching a rocket. The energy and the skill set you need to get the rocket off the ground is different than what it takes to get into orbit. And usually once you get off the ground, by the time you get into orbit, there's certain things that are falling off, right? And I think as entrepreneurs, we have to recognize the areas in which we need to either outsource our ignorance or identify our value proposition. Because I'm very similar to you. I'll get it off the ground, but outside of that, we got Mikkel on our team, who's a Harvard grad, right? Like, let's put this systems, this infrastructure in place so we can use the term scale with integrity, right? Because my feeling is there, my emotion is there, the vision is there, but there's different systems and operations that we need to have in place that I just ain't got nothing on it, and so I'd rather you do it. So I think that's a good example of how complementary skill sets and not having ego when having communication with other leaders, and also operating with humility, real time, right? To ensure that you don't waste time, because that's the currency and the main resource that we have.
I also think, I operate with a high amount of humility, and sometimes people challenge my backbone. Like, they're like, why aren't you being a little more firm? And sometimes that feedback is good. I think I'm a very tactful, discerning, firm guy when I need to be. I don't feel like I just give in, but where I'm going with this is this. Sometimes it's better to own much less of a bigger pie. Yeah. And I've met a lot of founders who struggle with that. Yeah. I had competitors who, I went to them and like, now we're not competing anymore. If you come over here too, Teamworks could buy, and no, we're going to do it on our own, and sometimes it's just better to own a smaller piece of a bigger pie. And maybe that's the father, husband with other priorities talking, but you have to understand the size of the market, the total addressable market that you're playing in with your business. And sometimes the market's only so big, and the business is only going to grow so much. And if there's a bigger player, sometimes it's good to get partnered with them.
Right. I think I recently said 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
Exactly.
And so that's a really good takeaway, especially. And we see it, these different mergers and acquisitions happening at an institutional level now. We saw it definitely expedited once COVID hit. Everyone was pretty much paralyzed, right? At the same time, we all had to sit still. And coming out of that, these expenses that and overhead that companies are realizing, like, we don't need this much real estate. We don't need X, Y, and Z. And we're seeing more mergers and acquisitions to really capitalize off of economies of scale, right? And so wise insight. So as we get into having an understanding of the market, and your market has evolved from high school athletics to grown folks getting into the gym, making sure they getting their mind and body right, to the college athletics through the prism of the athletes leveraging what they have access to, but also implementing we'll just say some additional assets for the colleges and universities. Now we got the behemoth, the big daddy of them all. I do got to say this because it's funny that Jim mentioned the witness protection comment. I had the great opportunity. I think the other gentleman name was Thomas Corner. Whenever it was with, shout out EDPA. We were doing a panel discussion there talking about we'll just say the state of athletics. And Jim mentioned, and this was the first time I heard Jim say it like this. He was like, look, all this NIL, name, image, and likeness, it's just pay for play. You got folks money laundering, and just went into it. And I was like, does he have a bodyguard? Because what he is talking about is speaking directly to the top tax brackets right across the country. And whenever money gets disrupted, minds get frustrated, right? And so I really appreciate you standing on the principle of truth and calling it exactly what it is. And so as we get into athletes.org and what you have established, what you and the team have established as the problem that you're solving, can you share a little bit more about the different industries that exist? And when I say industries, we'll just say Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, on how they work with their athletes because they get paid. And then some of the discrepancies that you've been able to point out, because again, as we survey across the country, most of the information that we're receiving are from folks that are not on the front line. And if they're getting information, they may have one or two sources. Your source, we'll just say Rolodex, is, all across the country at every level, right? And so if you could just speak to why athletes.org exists, some of the misinformation on collective and NIL, and then we can, lean into what we need to do as not only a community, but also as stakeholders that either watch sports or we may have children that's in sports to make sure that we can support where athletes.org is going.
Yeah, so first of all, the initial part of your question regarding pro sports and how it works, the NFL does north of $20 billion a year in revenue. It's the most successful sports league in the world and, of course, America. And the rules are all set through a process called collective bargaining, where the union, the NFL Players Association, the NFLPA, negotiates with the NFL for all the rules there are, how many games they play. You're seeing they want to add an 18th game now. They can only do that through collective bargaining, all the way down to the rules in the game and the quarterback, rules and everything you can think of, healthcare coverage and, coverage after you're done playing and everything. But it also includes what's called revenue share. So 50% of the revenue of that $20 billion that the NFL makes each year goes to the players. That's how their salaries are paid. Okay. The NBA has the NBPA. The NBA has the NB Players Association, the National Basketball Players Association. Those two groups collectively bargain all the rules for the NBA that you experience. The salaries come out of that, and that's another 50% revenue share. So $10 billion is what the NBA makes. Half of that goes to the players. The MLB and all the other pro sports leagues, except for the WNBA, are the same. So they're all 50% or close to it rev shares. WNBA, the beef with the WNBA right now is that the rev share percentage is not the same as the other leagues. Those players are not saying they want to get paid the same as the NBA players. A lot of people are misunderstanding and thinking that's what they're saying. They're just saying, we want our rev share to be 50% of revenue, right?
Yeah.
But in all the other leagues, it's 50%. All right. Now, college football is the second most popular sport in our country behind the NFL. College football and college sports does $18 billion in annual revenue. So $8 billion more than the NBA does, or $8 billion more than the MLB does.
Wow.
Okay? But the difference is in college sports, they don't split half the money with the players.
Right.
Now, fine print, $18 billion, but $6 billion of that is from fundraising and donations.
Right.
Okay, so let's take that out, call it $12 billion. Of the $12 billion, 90% of that money comes from big time college football. I'm talking 20 to 25 teams are what drives all of the college football revenue.
Wow.
Okay?
Yep.
I'm a Syracuse fan. We're not part of those 25 teams right now.
Yeah.
And I can admit that. When you look at the ratings, you look at the top 25 teams, that's where the value in college football comes, and 90% of the 12 billion comes from those teams, okay? And so for what's been happening for over a century is football players have been signing up to play football without getting paid, but they get a scholarship, and the rest of the money can be used to pay for all of the other sports to exist and the scholarships and expenses associated with those sports, okay? That's what's happened forever. It wasn't a problem when the industry did $1 billion, but now they're doing north of 10 billion.
Right.
And the scholarship ain't enough anymore.
Yeah.
It used to be
Yeah.
at one point. Now, there were other problems back then, like healthcare coverage or the student athlete term I told you before. Let me sidebar.
Yeah,
I don't
please.
like the term student-athlete. The reason I don't like the term is because it represents an amateurism model that was created by a guy named Walter Byers, who was the leader of the NCAA from 1951 to 1987. For 36 years, this guy led the NCAA. He came up with the amateurism idea that these athletes get a scholarship and it's an amazing experience that can catapult them for the rest of their life after they're done. And in exchange for that, you know, they play football for the university. And then a guy named Ray Dennison dies playing football, college football. And his wife wants workers' comp and other benefits that anybody would want if their husband died playing football, but they create the term student-athlete to get around having to pay that family what they were owed, okay? So, well, it wasn't a student that got hurt. It was a student-athlete. They knew the risk they were taking. And so that's the term. If you ever get a chance to interview D. Smith, he's written a really wonderful op-ed about this that you can look up. But it's a term that you know isn't really associated with something that that is good and that is fair. And so the interesting part about Byers is he retires from the NCAA in 1987, and a few years later, he writes a book called Unsportsmanlike Conduct, condemning everything he created over those 36 years, condemning the term student-athlete, condemning the amateurism model, condemning the fact that players don't get paid. This was written in the early 90s by the guy who created it all. Wow. It was his penance for what he had done before he died.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
And that was in the 90s, and they still didn't change anything until they were forced to in the courts with O'Bannon. So that's the sidebar on why I don't like the term. It's also a way to understand the history of the industry and then all the breakdowns of the revenues of college sports versus the revenues of pro sports and how little a piece of pie the athletes get versus with scholarships and benefits, their piece is still much smaller than the salary piece of the pie that the pro leagues get. It gives you perspective, okay?
Right.
So in 2022, we're 1 year in the NIL, and I'm still the CEO at Influencer. And a lot of schools, more than 220 of them, are using our software to at least report all of the transactions their athletes are doing. Some are also using our fintech where the athletes are getting paid through our software. And so we had over $100 million of NIL data from that first year of NIL. It's 2022, NIL started in July 2021. And so a lot of leaders, athletic directors, commissioners asked me to come speak about what was going on in our data set because nobody really knew what was going on. They heard about this kid, Nico, from California, but he was going to Tennessee for $8 million. Is that real? Like, what's happening? There's no data.
Right.
So I would put my data up on a screen, and I would do it in places like DC where I met with all the FBS ADs at once, or I would do it at private meetings. And I'd say, hey guys, here's $100 million of NIL data. Okay. Almost 90% of the money is coming from your donors. They're laundering money through a shell company called a collective to pay your players to play at your school. And I know you don't like the words pay and play in the same sentence, but the reason we're here in this unstructured environment where NIL is being manipulated to be used to pay your players is because that O'Bannon beat you in court 6 years ago. And you didn't do anything to create a system and get in front of it. So now the system's happening to you. And there's new court cases. There's House versus the NCAA. There's Carter, Johnson, Hubbard versus the NCAA. And they're all about you, the school, paying the athlete directly for their services. And I think you got to figure this out, because if you don't, it's going to just spawn out of control. And I get a lot of pushback. And so by the end of the year, I started to research what the NFLPA did with the NFL and how that really made the league into a league where everybody wins.
Yeah.
And I started studying it in other pro leagues. Eventually, I met guys like D. Smith and many others who gave me their perspective on the situation. And I decided, you know what? I built Influencer. I've sold to Teamworks. It's mostly operating without me. This is the next problem to solve. There needs to be a seat at the table for college athletes to not only speak into compensation and how they get compensated and what the cap is and what the contract looks like, but to speak into what the agent regulations are and the financial advisor regulations are, so they don't get taken advantage of. They need to speak into what the health and safety standards are, including the health care they should get when they're done playing. They need to speak into every part of what the experience is, because when they do that, when you collectively bargain and you involve the athletes in agreeing to the rules with the league and they sign a document, there's no more lawsuits.
Yeah.
And when there's no more lawsuits, you can start to have transparency and you can start to hold the rules accountable and enforce them. And that's what we still don't have, as I'm talking about it right now in college sports. There are no rules. There isn't a transfer portal. That's a marketing term. You can unenroll and enroll anywhere you want, anytime you want. There is no cap. That they say $20 million. They're getting around that cap with marketing deals that allow athletes to get paid on top of the cap. And I love that the athletes are taking advantage of the system like that, but it's not sustainable. There's going to be a time where there's just not enough money, except for a few amount of schools, to be able to compete at the highest level. And we need to really create a system like the NFL, like the NBA, where it works. And the only way to do that is to have athletes at the table. So I started athletes.org in August of 2023. I announced I was stepping down at Influencer in the first week of August. And I was getting all this congratulatory texts from ADs and commissioners and people who I built relationships with, building Influencer and Teamworks. And then a few weeks later, Brandon Copeland, my partner, who retired from a 10-year NFL career, he had just retired, Penn grad, Wharton, really sharp guy, built a great class as a professor at Penn while he was playing in the NFL. A lot of it is teaching a lot of the same stuff you teach, and best-selling author, in the financial space. And so Cope, as I call him, was the perfect partner. And me and him went to New York and launched athletes.org as the first college athlete players association at the end of August. And I'll tell you, I did not realize how much heat I was going to get and how fast it was going to come. And you know what? The first few months were tough. But as we started signing up athletes, spending time with athletes, we started realizing that they just don't have the information on any of this stuff. And they want to understand it, and they want a seat at the table. And so if you fast forward 2 years in, we have more than 5,000 members. And we focus on signing up athletes that are power conference, basketball and football, because that's who's really going to push the needle for change. But we have athletes outside of that as well. We provide our athletes with a free membership, and they get free legal, free accounting, free mental health, financial literacy, a bunch of services that valued partners provide in a pro bono manner through a member app we built. So they can access, an hour of free legal or review a contract if they need it, or an hour of help with their taxes if they're trying to finish their taxes. They also can vet agents with our platform. So if somebody wants to work with them, they can do a background check on them. And so we're further along than anyone in history at organizing college athletes. We've got 5,000 of them, but also serving them with real benefits. And we also get them together. College football playoff, we had 50 of the power conference schools represented with players that met in a room, that traveled to Atlanta from all over. And we met and talked about the transfer portal and what the rules that they want are. We talked about compensation and how they want it structured. We talked about health and safety standards. It was amazing. And we've been doing that all along with them, virtually through their app, but also in person. We brought 20 athletes to DC to meet with senators who are being asked by the schools to get involved with legislation around this issue. Well, for the first time, senators actually heard from athletes, which they rarely do. And so we're organizing their voice and doing it unlike anybody's ever done it before, with a great team. People who've worked for the NCAA, worked for schools, worked for pro teams. And we've got a board that is just amazing. We've got Hall of Fame coaches like Jim Boeheim. We've got former athletic directors like Sandy Barber, who retired from Penn State recently. We've got, executives from big agencies like Jason Rainey from Wasserman, who runs Wasserman. But we also have Jim Quinn, who won every major case over the last 40 years for the players against the leagues. He created free agency in NFL football in '93.
Wow.
And so he leads our legal efforts. So we've built all this, and while we've built it, more lawsuits have come like I told them they would. They just settled the House case, which is forcing the schools to now have to pay up to $20 million a year in NIL deals with the athletes.
Yep.
But the problem we still have is there are no rules. The only way you can really set rules without lawsuits coming back to the schools is with collective bargaining. And the real ultimate problem is we're still calling these deals NIL deals, and they're not.
Yeah.
They're performance deals.
Right.
The deal for the player is to play quarterback, to play point guard, not to do any sort of marketing activity. Right. There can still be real marketing deals from, the bakery, the business, whatever it is. That's not what NIL mostly is. NIL is pay for play.
So with this $20.5 million, $21 million that the schools are now responsible for with the most recent settlement, may not be the most recent settlement, but the settlement that you reference, that's ultimately a new expense item. And so have colleges and universities, and we could even focus on the top 25, top 50, were they even making money?
No. So like Ohio State last year led the nation in gross revenue for any athletic department. They had just over 300 million, but they lost 30 million. And that was before the 20 million they're going to have to now pay the athletes. So all of the schools, even Ohio State, has to come up with 20 million new dollars. Now, you don't have to do it. You can do zero. Yeah. But if you do zero, you're not going to be able to compete.
Facts.
Because the scholarship is not the floor anymore. The floor is paying athletes something, and the scholarship's like in the basement. Okay, it just is.
It's a fact,
right? At least for football.
Yeah.
Now for other sports, all they're going to get is a scholarship because they're not producing revenue, and that's still the baseline.
Right.
But for big time college football, if you want to compete, you got to do the 20 million.
Yeah, you can.
And really, if you want to compete, you got to do the 20 million and still have a collective that can find marketing ways to get around paying more than 20 million.
Yep.
That's what you got to do. So really, rosters are already costing up towards 30, maybe 40 million, and it's unsustainable because of how it's all structured.
Yeah.
The industry desperately needs, believe it or not, more revenue. And they also need cost control. It's the only way the industry will survive.
Yeah.
And the only way to get more revenue is you have to do a new media deal because that's where the real money is. And the media deal has to be done in a unified way where it's not conference by conference, but FBS, all 136 schools, goes to market as one and negotiates a media deal with a network that wants more of the games like we had last week between Penn State and Oregon or Alabama and Georgia every weekend. Because those games will get more viewership and that will generate more revenue for the networks and thus for all the schools. And so you got to, number one, you got to grow revenue, and it's going to be through a unified media deal. And that probably won't happen until the early 2030s because the conference media deals are already intact with the ESPNs, Foxes, and others. And the conferences aren't going to rip up those deals, and neither will the networks. So you need more revenue. And in the meantime, to generate more revenue, you're going to see jersey patches, you're going to see logos on fields, and you're going to see, you might even see a conference rename itself. We heard a rumor earlier this year the Big 12 might become the All-State Conference. You know what I mean? So, so they're going to find incremental ways to generate revenue now, but the big opportunity to generate more revenue is a new media deal that's unified with all the FBS schools, or at least the top ones. So they got to grow revenue. That's how they're going to do it. But then they got to figure out how to be able to predict costs. Yeah. Because if it's just a race to the bottom and there really is no cap, some schools can just keep going. Right. And I know a lot of SEC fans are in your network, but I'm here to tell you, Michigan's got a lot more money than any SEC school. They got 20 billionaires. Alabama has 0. Okay. Ooh. So like the reality is like, this is going to just go this up, up, up. And it's great for the athletes right now. Right. But if it becomes a house of cards and explodes, it may go in the wrong direction for athletes in the future. Yep. But to go back to the crux of the problem, we're calling these payments, even the ones from the 20 million the school's paying, NIL, when it's really pay for play. It's a problem for everyone. Right. Let me explain. For the school and the coach, it's a problem because really you want the paper to say you're getting paid to play quarterback so the coach can hold you accountable to doing what? Facts. Playing quarterback. Facts. For the athlete, it's a disadvantage because it should be a W-2 deal where you're getting all the things that you get taken out of your paycheck taken out of your paycheck and withheld, because you don't know how to do that on a 1099 basis. Now you got to find somebody and pay them to do that for you. It's super complicated.
Yes.
And I understand there's ways to take advantage of it not being W-2 and start an LLC and do all these things, but these are complicated processes.
Facts. Yep.
And for an 18 to 22-year-old, it'd be a lot simpler if it was a W-2 and they were getting paid the right way. For the industry and the fans, it would be great if they called it pay for play, because you now know what everybody's getting paid.
Right.
We know what Patrick Mahomes gets paid to play quarterback. $45 million. Right. We can see his contract online, look at the incentives and everything. You know what we don't know? We don't know what he gets paid by State Farm, because that's a real NIL deal, and it's his data he can keep to himself. Right. This is all being done as if it's a State Farm deal from the school, and now we don't know what anybody's getting paid. So the market can't really set.
Right.
And you can't really say, well, what's a really good QB1 worth? What's a really good DB1 worth? It's all over the place.
Yeah.
And so there's ways for the top 1% of athletes to take advantage of it, and I love it.
Yeah.
But as a sustainable system for athletes, for the schools to be able to survive and fund it, for the industry to create a situation where young people can leave and be catapulted for the rest of their life, we need to have rules and structure. And the only way to do it, where it can be enforced, and the rules are not only enforced, but there's no lawsuits, is collective bargaining. Yeah. And so athletes.org is built to represent the athletes in that collective negotiation. And now we just need the schools to wake up and say, we're going to come to the table and figure this out. And every day we get closer to that, because the pain of not having rules and the pain of all these new costs is really bringing the schools my way every week.
It's happening. Athletes.org is going to be the organization. I see it. One of the things that pretty much everyone knows is that we are in a space of financial education, financial literacy. Recently, we've been at a few different colleges and universities, and even we'll just say one that is a top 25 school. So we have the opportunity to get with the men's basketball team, the women's basketball team, and the football team. And as we were speaking with the athletic director, speaking with the CEO of the collective, we explained to them that this is actually an economic issue. If you don't have the best way to manage these resources, you're actually going to create a shock in your local economy, because they're not managing it the right way. They may purchase a house, they may make all these different decisions, but if something happens, they get injured, they don't understand their contract, they transfer before they receive all their resources. Now those dollars are no longer in this particular area, but also this impacts your alumni, right? And so I know that it's going to be really interesting when you see more of these athletes playing during Sunday, Thursday, or Monday, and they get on the screen and say, hey, what school you represent? They may say 4 schools. Like what school are you really going to lean in on? But one of the value propositions, or one of the business models of colleges and universities, is your donors, right? And so knowing that these individuals are receiving income that it may be in their best interest to have some type of a deduction, this is a great way to introduce themselves. And so there is a good bit of financial unpreparedness. We even did a pre-test with our athletes and their parents. Some don't understand the difference between a W-2 and a 1099. Most didn't understand that they have to pay taxes. Parents didn't understand who they needed to call when it pertained to issues when they had with their child and understanding their contract. How come I didn't receive the contract? Well, it's not with you. And so there's all these issues tied to, even when they receive the money, that is going to essentially create a domino effect into the corporations that are near, the organizations that are near, the donors that gave money, because they're thinking about, as you mentioned, like, hey, yeah, we put money up, but little Johnny and I went to a different school 8 months later, right? How can we retain and recruit some of these top athletes? And so the money flow is always a good way to see how things are working. Now, you mentioned the collective bargaining agreement. And we've seen historically that the NFL has struggled when it pertains to identifying what they're going to agree on, right? And so, one, we got to get together. So, right, that's the collective aspect of it. Second is, all right, what are we bargaining, right? Like, what is it that we want leverage with? When we look at where athletes.org is now, what needs to be true from an athlete perspective? So, let's someone is in the NCAA, they may be at East Tennessee State. You may have someone that is at North Dakota, someone that is on the West Coast, and they're like, yo, I'm rocking with what Jim is doing. I need some support. How do we mobilize the athletes to create, I guess, not only a stronger base, but could potentially help expedite placing athletes.org as the trusted voice, but also the lane of governance and infrastructure to be able to onboard at every level?
So I think this really goes back to collectively bargain, you need two entities that come together to negotiate a deal. One entity represents the players,
Right.
the other entity represents the teams. So NFLPA represents the NFL players, a couple thousand of them, and then there's 32 team owners and the commissioner that represent the NFL. And they come together. There's one player from each of the 32 teams that's a player rep that represents the vote of their team. And then you've got the owners, and there's a voting process on everything that's being done in that deal. And now that's been done a bunch of times, because it's usually done every 5 to 10 years, depending on the term of the deal. When it's up again, there's a lot that's going to carry over and not be renegotiated, but there's always a few real deal points that, right now it's the 18th game, right?
Yeah.
And the players are going to want some trade-offs to get that, not just more money.
Facts.
They'll get more money naturally because they got a 50% rev share, so it's going to be more money from an 18th game. They're going to get more money, but like there's some other things they're going to want.
Right.
And they're going to use this bargaining opportunity to try to get those things, right? So you have to have two entities. We've built the entity for the athletes.
Yep.
I don't know what the entity is for the teams. Are we going to negotiate just with the power conference football teams? There's 70 of them. Are they going to create a new league? Are we going to do it with a bundle of 3 conferences? Is it going to be with, 3 different entities and there's 3 different deals based on the sport and the level of play? I don't know that answer. I know what I think it should be. Like, I think it should start with power conference football, because that's where the majority of the revenue comes from. And I think there's ways to still do it beyond that in other sports and at other levels. But ultimately, I can't figure that out for them too.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm working on the athlete entity. And so then, to really get into your question, in the NFLPA, the way they get their members is whenever a rookie signs with the NFL, with a team, let's say my partner, Brandon Copeland, his first team was the Baltimore Ravens, his hometown team. When he signed his contract with the Ravens, he automatically became a member of the NFLPA. And then the NFLPA had a day where they came in and talked to the whole team and acclimated themselves with them and let them know how they can help them moving forward. Eventually, Brandon became a player rep 7 years into his career for the last 3 years.
Wow.
He voted on the 2020 CBA as a player, right? I believe it's a Patriot. And so, there's no way we're going to organize 500,000 athletes. That's how many there are in all 3 divisions of college sports, or 150,000 athletes one by one through agents, through parents, through referrals, like we're doing it now. Like it's not going to happen that way. We're proud that we've signed up 5,000 because there is no pro players association in America that has even close to as many members as we have, because all their numbers are smaller, right? MLB, I just said, NFL only has 2,000.
Right.
So we've done it one by one. I mean, grinding with a team of 12 people.
Yeah.
So we're proud of that, and the athletes have helped us. We get a guy like Diego Pavia to come to Atlanta for our CFP meeting, and before you know it, he's signing up his teammates. You know what I mean? And now he's going to come down to Alabama this week to play the Tide.
Yeah.
Should be an interesting game. But the point I'm trying to make is we got to know what that entity is we're negotiating with. Then we'll know who we have to sign up. But also, if they're agreeing to recognize us as the Players Association, whoever we don't have, they're going to help us get them exposed to AO so that those folks can be members. And then each team has a player rep. And then our legal team brings them up to speed on everything, and they vote on all the key issues. We actually have a model deal that we're going to be putting out in a couple weeks that we've worked on all year with GMs of power conference football teams, ADs from power conference schools, and our athletes. And we've been working on it for 8 months to get their feedback on what the transfer rules should be, what the compensation rules should look like. Should there be a veteran bonus to motivate players to stay? Minimum 2-year contract for all freshmen to commit out front with a cap for what they can make in the first year, but then what they can earn in incentives later. These are all things that are not all agreed upon. And some are yeses and some are nos, and some of the things have evolved and changed. But those are the type of topics that have been brought up and argued about and debated about. We're going to release a 40-page document to show the world, first of all, the two sides aren't even as far apart as people think. A lot of players want transfer rules. They want continuity on their team.
Right.
You know what I mean? But they want them to be fair, and they also want to be able to leave if their coach doesn't want them there, which is what most of the portal is used for. Everybody thinks, oh, there's 4,000 guys in the portal. They're greedy trying to get money. Man, that's 500 of them.
Yeah.
All right? The other 3,500 were told by their coach, you will never play it down at this school again. So they went in the portal. So, I mean, that's going to be released in a few weeks, and I think it will show people the two sides aren't as far apart as people think.
Right. Well, I love the infrastructure AO has built. I'm gonna make sure I properly share it. I think AO is a lot better than athletes.org. I get tongue tied on that. AO is going to be it. Now, as we a few more questions before we close on up. When you think about the colleges and universities and some of the structure that they're using now, I believe that there is this platform called NIL Go that they've been using to be able to keep up with deals and anything over $600 or something of that nature. And aren't they currently working with different colleges or universities? And could that be the infrastructure that all of the colleges and universities use? I know Deloitte's a part of it from an accounting standpoint, but I feel like that may be a good start for them because they're gonna need to tighten up.
So originally, Teamworks, this is after I left, won the RFP from the NCAA to be the tech system for all deal disclosures to be put through. Now, one thing to note here, athletes don't upload most of their deals, no matter what the system is.
Facts.
Okay. And sometimes they're told not to.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But to move forward, Teamworks built this system called NIL Assist for the NCAA after they won their RFP. And it was meant to be a system of record for all the deals happening with NIL. Then the settlement happened. And in the settlement, one of the provisions was the creation of the College Sports Commission, which is an organization that is built to stop what's called circumvention of the cap. So the House settlement has a $20 million a year cap. It goes up a little bit every year based on revenues, but it's a $20 million a year cap. And so that money can come from the schools to the athletes. So if your school's paying you directly for an NIL deal, even though we know it's pay for play, if your school's paying you directly, it's part of the $20 million cap. The commission's job is to monitor every deal outside of the school of $600 or more. So any deal you do that's $600 or more, you're supposed to upload that transaction not to the NCAA system that Teamworks built, but to this new system that Deloitte built called NIL Go. And you upload the transaction, and the goal is they're going to look at it and make sure that there's a valid business purpose in it. And if there's not, they can say no and stop you from taking the money. Or maybe you already took the money and they say no a few days later, and now you got to give the money back.
Wow.
And if you disagree, there's an arbitration opportunity that you can exercise, and you can go to arbitration, which takes only 45 days. And in that arbitration process, the best part is if you've been paid by your school and now you're being paid by a collective, a similar amount of money, you can use the deal from the school as a comp in your arbitration. I think to argue you should be able to keep the same amount of money for the same type of services that you got in a collective deal. Right. What's happening is you're seeing them push back on less and less deals because it really doesn't have a leg to stand on. And the reason it doesn't have a leg to stand on is there is no collectively bargained cap. In the pros, they have these systems. Right. You're seeing it right now with Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That deal was done similar to a collective deal to get around the cap.
Yeah.
Right. And if they find out that this is true, a lot of people are going to get in trouble because that cap was collectively bargained.
Yeah.
You saw it in the WNBA 2 years ago. The Las Vegas Aces, who the average player made about $80,000 salary. Each player got offered $100,000 each by the city of Las Vegas to promote the city, and WNBA stopped the deal because it was an unfair advantage for the Las Vegas Aces franchise. So anti-circumvention systems exist in all these leagues where there's a collectively bargained cap, and they work. But it's not going to work in college sports without a collectively bargained cap.
Yeah. That is interesting. Wow. Even the reference of Mr. Leonard, shout out. I believe his name's Pablo, the gentleman that broke it off, because he had me up at 4 o'clock in the morning saying, what is going on? And this is, a really good reflection of understanding how business works, understanding how money flows, but also being able to have access to examples to be able to get clarity on some of the steps that you're taking. And so this is really, really good feedback and insight. As we close up, are there any final thoughts that you would like to share with our audience in regards of AO? We have folks that are listening that are parents that have athletes. You say I didn't say student athletes. They have parents
College
that have that are aspiration to get into college athletics. I do have a similar rant. I get frustrated when they call the NFL a career. I don't believe it's a career. I don't believe the NBA is a career. I don't believe Major League Baseball is a career, because they don't tell doctors they need to get a plan B. Like, yo, if this doesn't work out, make sure. They only tell the athletes that, and so it's really more so an experience to create career type opportunities. But with the status of AO, the horizon that we see for Jim in regards to the future, and more of really truth telling that you will represent at a national level. What remarks would you like to share for those that say, hey, I got a child that is a college athlete. I have a child that's about to be a college athlete. I know someone that is a coach. Where would you say, or what would you say to them in regards of, this is why AO is important, and this is how you can be a part of the movement?
So what I would say is, starting with the athlete, use the game. Don't let the game use you, right? And I used baseball, and I only played Division II, but it really set the stage for my career as an entrepreneur and for a lot of other things in my adult life. So use the game and get everything out of it. And I think with the opportunity to now get paid, you can really do something special, man. Yeah. I mean, you can, whether you're getting paid 50 grand or 500 grand, you have cash to now use the financial advice that guys like you can teach. Yep. If you don't have money, it's a lot harder to practice these things. You've got cash to practice it, to pay for your tax. You know why it's great to do your taxes? Because now when you go to buy a house or you go to build a business, you've got tax returns to show. That is awesome. You should want every dollar to go in there. Even though you do have to pay taxes, that's the law. You now have a way to use your taxes to show proof of income to go buy a house, to go start a business. Leverage. So pay your taxes, put everything on there. Do it the right way. Be honest with it. Right. If you're going to use credit, use it the right way to get to make your credit even better. Most young people, when they get out, don't have any credit. You're going to have credit now. It should be great because you have money. But most importantly, forget about the money. Use the experience to meet everybody you can meet and to establish relationships, so that when you're not playing anymore, they don't care about you as much, because they won't care about you as much when you're not playing. It's just human nature. All right. We all know people who used to play. It's not the same when they do play. So when they don't care about you as much because you don't play, they're still going to care about you, maybe even more, because of who you are and who you were to them when you did play. And that's going to help you with connections to do things you don't even know yet. That's right. So I start there, and then with the parents, support all that. Yeah. Right. Support all that. You know, if a parent really wants to dive in deep, you know, and learn about this, I think a lot of parents can do that to a degree where they don't even need an agent. Yeah. And they can avoid having to pay an agent a fee, and instead they can then help do this. And that's really what we've built. Yeah. So I agree. I like AO for the brand better than athletes.org. But the reason we went with athletes.org is so I can make it as simple as this. If you're a parent, go to athletes.org and fill out a form to be a part of our parents council. And we've got lawyers that can look at contracts for you. We've got people that can help you with all the different questions you're going to have, so that you don't have to hire somebody right out the gate. Right. And so I think, but ultimately, if you're a parent, support what I just said. Yeah. Squeeze the most out of the game, and don't let the game use you. Use the game for everything that you can do. I think that is everything. And unfortunately, there's a lot of parents that are living their dream through their kids. Yes. And there's a lot of kids that are getting out of high school, and then they become young adults, and they're now in college. And you know, it's you talk about identity. My identity was messed up as a guy who wanted to get drafted and play minor league baseball out of a Division II school. What would I be like if I was a star player and got paid $2 million, but I got hurt and I never ended up panning out in the NFL? The quarterback at Florida State. Yep. Right? Yep. That's your school, ain't it?
It's not Sanford.
Okay.
Sanford.
Yeah, I know it's not. I know Sanford. I didn't know if that was like your school. I didn't know if that. Who are you a fan of?
Sanford.
Okay, good. Yeah. I like that. That's a good. I'm the same. Syracuse, right? Like, and UAB. Shout out Dill for turning it around. That's right. But listen, I just think parents, we've got to come together and support these amazing young athletes to realize there's more than just this game, and to use it for everything. Absolutely. And we played Florida State. That's why I definitely got to lean on Sanford. We got smacked. I just knew you're from Florida. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. We got smacked by Florida State. I played a good game, but we lost the game.
But yeah, Sanford is, especially with us being FCS D1AA, we played Auburn, we played Ole Miss. And then I had D1 offers. So I've always known that, I see them as competition at the end of the day. But we would have gave them a run for their money, for sure, especially the skill players, for sure. And it's really good feedback, especially when it pertains to not only the college athletes, but those in college. Like, leverage the relationships, leverage that network, go meet with the professor, like lean into those office hours. That's what helped me transition out, because again, I stopped playing ball, but I still moved like I had a helmet on, right? And that was one of the issues when it pertained to open up some of the opportunities for myself. And so that's excellent feedback. And then also for the parents, because we unfortunately deal with, hey, Isaac, my son just signed a $400,000 deal. I'm actually with a real estate agent. We're looking at a $300,000 house. Ms. Johnson, let's not do that, right? And so there has been a number of frustrating examples that we've been helping the athlete and the parent navigate due to not having the right example, not having the right people to call, because you have households that have not made any more than $55,000 a year, and they got 3 or 4 dependents, and now you have a child that's about to sign 3, 4, 5, 600,000, and they think that everything's going to change now, and it's just like, that's not the case. Let's not operate by trying to maximize the most amount of money that goes into our account. Let's maximize our awareness of the language of money, and then we'll know how to keep money in the account long term. To your point, like let's not try to circumvent taxes. That's tax evasion. There's tax avoidance, but you're talking about tax evasion by not paying taxes at all. Because there's a lot more benefit on the back end, right? Through the leverage, showing the banks that you are responsible with money, but also being able to get money from them if you build your credit and just take those necessary steps. So as parents, if you don't understand, just wait. Like, don't make a rushed financial decision because it feels good. Speak with an expert, and if you have to pay them to have a conversation, this is why athletes.org exists. And so at any point in which you have just like, I don't know how to do this. My son sent me this contract, athletes.org. Hey, I'm approached by this agent, athletes.org. Like it just as you said, it makes it simple. And that's one of the issues we've come across because, we're hand-to-hand combat. We're at this college and university. We're on this campus talking to these athletes. And I've shouted you out in different capacities, but now our ability to be able to speak confidently to the stakeholders that we essentially share our information with, this will be an initial, I would just say an extension of the resources that are available to them in a way that will really maximize the opportunity that's in front of them. And so I'm grateful. I know our listeners are going to be grateful from this episode, my brother.
Thanks for having me, man. This was great.
Absolutely. I definitely want to say congratulations too, man. Like it's one thing to build something. It's another thing for someone to see value in it, right? And then they implement it in what they built. And you've done that multiple times. And I definitely see the future of college athletics having clarity because AO exists. And with clarity, people can move with confidence. And so thank you for your vision. Thank you for being a man of principles. Thank you for being a man of God. And it will all be 100-fold in regards to your blessing moving forward, man. So appreciate you, big dog.
Man, and I congrats to you. This place is really cool. Finally come over to see the place and what you've built and how you put your stake in the ground here in Ensley and the people you're helping and the work you're doing and now how you're scaling and what you're doing. SEC programs to help players and their parents. And I'm excited to converge a little bit. Our worlds are going to converge and it's going to be really cool. So congrats.
Absolutely. All right, good people, that is it with this episode of the Planning Podcast. Make sure you subscribe, stay tuned. We have more incredible information on the horizon. Candace, I think we got crypto coming up next, so we got some digital asset conversation going on. This is something that is right here in our pocket. So you could send $500 on Cash App, but you can also buy $500 in Bitcoin by moving your thumb over by about 3 centimeters. And so there's a good bit of governance that we're definitely going to talk about to make sure that they protect themselves, but also some of the best practices. And so we are excited because as we sit here, we are adamant about bringing industry experts. And I want to say probably about 4 years ago, I became one of the first people in the state of Alabama to get the Certified Digital Asset Advisor certification. So cryptography, NFTs, all that nerdy information, I like. And so we're going to be able to bring this to you in bite-sized approach so you can implement the information and increase your awareness. And before you allocate anything, we're gonna make sure we seat you with some good education. And so thank y'all. Subscribe, stay tuned, and of course, stay planted. We Gucci? Yes, sir.